Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishwaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we will continue with our study of this interesting text called the Gyanankusham. And once again, the purpose of this of these verses in this wonderful book is that for us to do what I would call course correction in our life. Course correction means that we want to make sure that we are headed in the right direction. That right direction means that my life is steadily improving to a point where I can become absolutely free in this life itself. This is the course that we are on. And of course there are, for anything so important and worthwhile, it's likely to have certain challenges, obstacles, and so on. So the Gyanankusham is to intelligently remove the obstacles in my way, because I have a certain idea of where I want to go, and then the question is, how do I get there effectively, expeditiously, and without any distractions that can bind me from going forward. And so the Gyanankusham just means that these are, if you may, course corrections with the help of my attitudes. Just by knowledge and my way of looking at things, it gives me a chance to cross over them, as opposed to fighting with them and so on. You know, often people will say, how do I get rid of my anger? Because that seems to be very powerful and this. And anger, of course, when we talk about anger, it doesn't mean the extreme form of anger that hopefully most of us have left behind. It really means any unpleasant way of looking at things, including worry, concern, etc., etc. So the whole shebang. So the anger, of course, is what is called an upalakshana, means that it's an example. But the whole spectrum of unpleasant experiences can be tackled as part of the same Gyanankusham. So this is what we are studying. So we went over verse number 12 last week, and I'd like to just briefly revise that before we go forward. So the verse 12 says, I won't repeat the Hindi on it, I'll just do the English translation. It says, if some people don't try to upset me, then I will have no way to test my patience and forbearance. In other words, I will have no way to test whether I'm really making progress or not. So in that sense, I should see that they are actually helping me to strengthen my ability to stay grounded. Just as it is essential to ensure that a newly installed post in a ground is firm by shaking it back and forth. So this is an important important nyaya. And the nyaya, I think there is a Sanskrit for it. Let me see if I can. Oh, where is it? Yeah. Oh, it's called a nyaya. Yeah, which says Sthuna Nikhanana Nyaya. Sthuna Nikhanana Nyaya. Sthuna means a post. And Nikhanana means shaking it back and forth. And so this is an important nyaya. Nyaya means these are rules to live by, examples. And it is important for us to test ourselves. Because if we don't, then we are doing ourselves a disservice by pretending everything is okay. So for example, if you are a wrestler, it is important for you to test your wrestling skills on a practice, what is called akhada, means a sort of like a practice one where you can go to a exercise facility, a practice facility, and you are given a reasonable amount of adversary, a reasonable level of adversary to test your skills. How realistic will it be that you're simply bulking up as a wrestler? You're eating a lot of food, good food, and overeating it and putting weight on, which is you should as muscles, muscle building. And but then you say, I don't want to test it by anyone. I will just straight away go to a match. These people will laugh at you. What are you talking about? Just get out of here. This is not the way to test it. Similarly, the soldiers who are ensuring the viability of a country are continuously given training, and there are war exercises. And if they don't go through that, then they're not sure that they can really be ready for the real one. So similarly here also, if you have so here Swami Maheshanji points out that a sadhaka means one who wants to be a siddha, wants to be an established jivan mukta. If that person says, I am practicing to really be controlling my mind and be peaceful, and I really don't want anyone to disturb me, and I just want to be quiet and so on and so forth, then chances are you are not really being realistic. Why? Because it's very likely that you will run into some issues and you wouldn't know how to handle them. So this is a very important part of the Advaita Vedanta. The Advaita Vedanta doesn't mean the absence of Dvaita. Advaita Vedanta doesn't mean the absence of duality, plurality, competition. It's kind of like saying, I want the whole ocean to be quiet. I don't want any waves. It should just be still for me. And really our reality is we are an ocean of consciousness. That's exactly who we are. We are an ocean of consciousness with a very high degree of concentration towards my body-mind as a wave. But we are ignoring the fact that we are a conscious entity with no beginning, no end. Always there. This is the fact. And I want that conscious ocean of consciousness to be quiet, peaceful. And anytime there is a disturbance, I said, no, just go away. So, a sadhaka, one who wants to really follow the precepts of Advaitha Vedanta, it doesn't mean that there is absence of Dvaita, absence of waves. It means despite waves. That is the real importance of what is called Advaita Vedanta. So this is an important thing to really register in your mind. You already know this, but I just want to point this out again. Advaita Vedanta is not the absence of conflict, it is despite conflicts. That is the real objective. And we actually went through this very briefly in the Kaivalya Upanishad on last Saturday, where Swami Viditatmananda had articulated that in the sense that the Advaita Vedanta is both imminent and transcendental. So these are important words and important concepts to really see. Imminent means sarva-vyapakaha. It's all over the place, like an ocean. But transcendental means that despite all the changes, I have no changes. So this conclusion, this conviction rather, I would say conviction, has to be tested. You cannot say, I'm very quiet and I'm very quiet, but I don't want anybody to be disturbing me. That means that I cannot stand disturbance. So the anger is of course an extreme case, but even any minor disturbance and so on. So this is the essence of this important verse, number 12. Okay. All right, let's go to number 13. So this one I will read in Hindi and then translate it. Yeah, 12 goes for a long ways. Number 13. No, this is 14. What happens? What happens with the 13? Yeah. So the Hindi translation of the text is, यदि अपने प्रभावों द्वारा व्यक्त हो जाएं, तो धर्म कीर्ति और धन को नष्ट करता है, तथा अगर बाहर प्रकट न हो पाए तो व्यक्ति के अपने ही शरीर को संताप देता है। इहलोक व परलोक कहीं भी क्रोध हित नहीं करता, अतः सज्जनों के मन में क्रोध रहे ही क्यों? So I won't repeat it, I'll just do the English translation for that. He says anger, if expressed outside through your physical actions, your eyes and and you become to shake, and it's very easy to see people who are angry. So if it is, that's an expression of anger, all the physical things. And of course, if people lose the control of their organs of action, you can hit someone, or shoot someone. All kinds of things can happen because of the outside. So anyway, it says, the verse says, the English translation of the verse says, anger, if expressed, creates a loss of tangible things, such as bodily harm or harm to the property and assets, either lawfully or through punishment or so on. So there is some physical damage because of the expressed anger. And moreover, if not only that, but it definitely results in a loss of goodwill and reputation, which is just as harmful, if not more. So this is the external expression of anger. If for some reason the anger is not expressed, but due to mental control is kept within yourself, then it starts to affect the health of the person. Either way, it results in tremendous harm to the individual, both in this life and even on subsequent ones. So to let the anger flourish is totally senseless. Either way, either expressed or not expressed. So once again, let's take the case of the external case, the expression one. So if one reacts by hitting someone back and injuring, or taking some drastic action of harming either the person or the family or the assets or the possessions, this leads to a loss on both sides. It's very possible that they would strike back to you, and you would have to cater to the repercussions of a escalating fight. You see examples of that happening. And of course, it gives you a temporary feeling of strength and invincibility. You will say, next time no one will challenge me. I can take care of myself. Who do the people think I am? A weakling? And I won't be pushed around. So when you have these feelings, there is another harm to yourself, which is really the main harm for a sadhaka, for a student of Vedanta. Because the student of Vedanta, through the approach in my life, as we have been taught and we are continuing to think about through Shravanam and Mananam, is that our problems stem from a misidentification with our body-mind complex. Just like you have a dream body-mind complex, and if you have an identification with the dream body and the dream mind, etc., then all of the experiences in the dream relating to that identified set of goods, things, becomes yours. So similarly here also in the waking state, our issue is that even though we are fundamentally free, but due to the old identification which has been going on for years and lives, I am identified with the limitations of myself as a person and myself as my personality, my body, my mind, my thinking. This is what I'm identified with, just like it is in the dream. So my objective through the teaching of Vedanta is not to identify, be aware of the phenomena of identification. And I want to really separate through Viveka the difference between Atma and Anatma. This is exactly what is being told. This is what I need to do. This is what all the Vedantic texts repeatedly point out as my goal. Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, whatever it is, it all have. This is the Tatparya Nishchaya. That you are not a human being, you are a Devata. And please to see that you are a Devata. You are actually the same as not only an ordinary Devata, you are Brahman itself, who is the ultimate Devata. You are, that's what you are, and so you should not be identifying unnecessarily. To try as much as possible to see that the box that you are enclosing in is loosened. There are screws on it and nails all around it, but loosen it. This is exactly the definition of the word Upanishad. So the words Upanishad, so Sat, in the Dhatu Sat for Upanishad means Shithali Karanam. One of the examples of, there are three of them, and one of them is called Shithali Karanam. Shithali Karanam means you loosen the identification so that you can actually remove the lid. Before you can remove the lid of a box, you first have to loosen all of the things that have secured it very well. Okay, that's the example. Now, when you get angry and you respond to a provocation, you are provoked and you are now reacting to it by saying, not me, do not push me around. I won't be pushed around. Who do you think I am? Don't challenge me. By these thoughts, leave aside the physical damage that we spoke about earlier, but with these thoughts, what happens is you are reversing the loosening of the identification. You become more identified than before. Who does this person think I am? I'm somebody to be reckoned with. Okay? I know how to protect my property and I won't be pushed around. So instead of saying, this is very interesting, that the whole experience of life is making me appear as though I'm pushed around. Going into a reverie and to think about it and to analyze it and to free myself from the grips of that thought, I'm actually making it stronger by saying, this is me. This is called ahankara. This is the real ahankara, ego. So that's another disadvantage of reacting and so on. Then of course the loss of yashas. So there the first one was external, one was artha, yashas, dharma, etc. Out of that yashas. So yashas means that even if you don't hit someone and injure someone, But the fact that you became angry, and you may have expressed it in your speeches and so on, means people will now evaluate you and say, oh my goodness, this person can get angry. Interesting. Wow, I thought he was a calm person, but he's not. He cannot control his anger. This affects your reputation, how people look at you, your feeling of adequacy and well-being, and so on and so forth. Swami Maheshananji gives a very real example from his life, very disturbing example, really, but it's something we can relate to. Well, he says that I knew of a person who had a very good reputation in the society. He was a good person and raised a very good family. Raised a family, actually not that good a family, we'll see in a minute. And had a good reputation, and people thought very highly of him. His friends were all, high court judges and politicians and so on and so forth. So he was well regarded. So he had a son who went into bad company and started the business of importing things and selling them off. And in the beginning, it looks like it was normal, innocuous. You have to be some business. You're an importer. But pretty soon, he started to import weapons, because there were more profit on that. And so there were people really bad people, who would say, if you can get through your connections these AK-47s and Sten guns and so on, we will give you a lot of money. And this person actually succumbed to doing weapon trading. This is a real case, Swami Maheshananji was saying. Finally, he was caught. And the evidence was presented to the judge. The judge looked at it and he says, what? You mean, and there are lots of cases in India where people, there are terrorists who are able to get their hands on these dangerous weapons. The judge all knew what the repercussions of doing that is. So he gave him a very stiff. He was thinking of giving a very stiff, had not given it yet. Now, the pressure upon this father of his started, beginning with his wife. This is your only son. I don't know he was the only son, but I'm just making it up. He was your only son, and you're going to put him, do you know he's going to be in jail the rest of his life? This is what I've heard. He's never going to be taken out. Yeah, he made a mistake, and I think we should just protect him and so on. And the son himself started crying and says, I didn't know what I was doing, and so on and so forth. So they told this guy that please go to your friend who is a high court judge who was supposed to give the evidence, to look at the evidence and give the judgment, and please get him away from him. So he says, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because that's my reputation. So there were pressures from all people, his family, his friends, his son, and so on. Finally, he broke down and he said, okay. So he went to the judge and said, this is the situation. I will make sure that he never does this again. Please give him a very light sentence. So the judge said, you are telling me that? I thought you were a good person. And I didn't know that you had this streak of corruption in you. That you are succumbing to your son who has done some terrible things. I am very disappointed in you. So he hung his head down and said, okay, do whatever you want to. So the judge actually let him go lightly. And so Swami Maheshananji says, this man was so crestfallen because of the loss of his reputation that he died within 6 months. He could not eat very well. He could not go out. His friends, he was afraid to face his longtime friends, and they were all looking down on him and says, what did you do? He hasn't done anything, except that he succumbed to this temptation of his son, the love of his so-called, the love of his son, which is really just means that he was attached to the son. So this is an extreme example, but this can happen. So now, the effect of anger from an external standpoint has been covered. Now let's go to the internal situation. Internal situation is that if for whatever reason you cannot express your anger, the typical case is that the person who has made you angry is much stronger than you are, much more powerful than you are, and you don't dare to really challenge him in any way. And so you swallow your anger. And the swallowing of the anger, I think, is an appropriate word. It's an appropriate expression, rather, the whole expression, swallowing the anger. Because it is not dissipating the anger, it is swallowing it. Swallowing it means what? Swallowing means that it has gone into the internal body mechanism, body-mind mechanism, and is stewing there. It's burning it. Instead of burning somebody's house, it is burning you. And even that last example of the judge and so on, it burnt him to a point where his health suffered. Heart is the first one to be, when somebody is deeply disappointed and frustrated. This is the frustration of not being able to express your anger. Then, of course, there's no steam valve to let go of it. And that pressure builds up and it really harms the very delicate mechanism that Ishvara has given to us. It has to be well protected and so on. And eventually it just eats into you. And in fact, it's interesting, Swami Maheshananji points out very good advice actually. He says that if you are forced to do this, for whatever reason, that you are controlling, so it's really not really self-control, it just means that you are frustrated because of the imploding of the anger. Then Swami Maheshananji says, you know what you should do? There is a certain energy that is being built up by these frustrations of the anger. That energy has to be dissipated. And so Swamiji says the best thing to do is to do some work and do some physical, walk a lot, work out. Do gardening, whatever it is, because if you don't do that, it's gonna hurt you. And so these are both the external and the internal aspects of being able to react. And so the best thing to do is to know all this. Think about it. And dissipate it as quickly as possible through your own knowledge of what the consequences are. The consequences are bad regardless of whether it's external or internal. And the best thing is not to even let it fester. And just, you may have to, it's a hurt to your ego, your ahankara, but it is best to just let it go. And the more you let it go, of course, the advantages of that are, and this is what Swami Dayananda used to say that, I still remember his advice on this, so beautiful. Swamiji says many times, Swami Dayananda used to say that many times, it is harmful to your own self-estimation. Your own self-estimation. Whatever happens outside is one thing, but due to not taking care of all these perturbations, all these upsetting things and so on properly, you leave a mark on your own estimation. You don't like yourself. I am unable to do this. I don't like myself. Even though externally people say, oh, you did a good job, so on and so forth. Internally you say, no. Who am I? So instead of who am I being a very positive journey, it becomes a negative journey. You're just going in the opposite direction. You begin to dislike yourself. That is it's very important for mental health, is regardless of what anyone else thinks of you, you have to genuinely think well of yourself. And all of these will be an antithesis to all of that. So that's an important point too. So anyway, that's number 13. Let's go to number 14 next. हिंदी। और भी एक विचार बताते हैं कि असत व्यवहार करने वाला हमारा हितैषी कैसे है। So in fact I can just translate as we go along. और भी एक विचार बताते हैं। We will now tell you another set of thoughts. And what are the set of thoughts? कि असत व्यवहार करने वाला हमारा हितैषी कैसे है. And that is how a person's bad behavior towards me is actually helpful to me. और भी एक विचार बताते हैं कि असद व्यवहार, व्यवहारा means behavior. Asad vyavahara means one which is not truthful, or one which is, you can say, bad, negative. करने वाला हमारा हितैषी कैसे है? हितैषी means one who's really who's doing me good. One who does good is called hitaishi. Friend. Who's my friend? द्वेषी पुरुष मेरे प्रति वही हिंसादि करता है जो मेरे कर्मों के प्रभाव से मुझे अवश्य मिलने हैं, अतः मेरे पूर्व अर्जित पार को वो हल्का ही कर रहा है. So he says, please see that this person is actually doing you a favor. How? Because he or she, who is the one who is really upsetting you in one form or the other, is only an instrument to implement the results of your own past actions, which you are carrying on your head all the time. And all this person is doing is lessening the burden of the previous wrong actions on the head. So it's something like this, where you are carrying this. In India, you see this, especially women who are carrying, these frail women, 90 pounds, 5 foot 6 inches tall. They're carrying this huge burden on the head because they have to make some living. And they are just carrying it on. They may have some kind of a pagadi on the head, and on top of that there's this huge basket with so many heavy things, and she has to balance her head very carefully so that it doesn't drop, otherwise she would be liable to all the loss. So she has to be very careful holding it, and sometimes she has to go up the steps and so on. So if someone comes along and says, let me help you, I think this is too heavy, here, let me take a couple of things off of you and I'll just carry it, you just go, isn't that person helpful? Similarly, it says that really the aspect of our life is that unbeknownst to us, we are actually carrying a lot of load on our head. And this is interesting that this is called the 3 kinds of debts that we carry on our head. So this is called Rinam. So Rishi Rinam, Deva Rinam, and Matra Rinam. We'll probably, I think we have already talked about it here and there, but we will do that again some other time. So these are the 3 types of debts that we carry, and one cannot be happy with any debt. This is a very interesting thing that you take a debt and then you spend it and you're saying, I'm okay, I'm all right, I'm doing well, I can buy things and I can buy a new car, and you get mortgage and I'm the homeowner and so on. The fact of the matter is that the debt eats into you. It's a worry. Worry time in and time out, day in and day out. So these are debts that you're carrying on your head. And by taking the debts away from you because of giving you some wrong results, it's taking some of the debt away from you. This is the right way to look at it. This is a very common thing that we Indians do. We'll say, I'll say that in Hindi, iske paap kat gaye hain. Paap kat gaye means if you fall down somewhere and break your bones, then everybody says, I'm very sorry, I'm very sorry, I'm very sorry that you do this. Internally we say, chalo iske paap kat gaye hain. It means that some of his burdens of his wrong actions in the previous life have been lessened. So here in this is the verse number 14. Now, the Shastra says that you need to understand that the cause of your happiness or sorrow is directly as a result of your past right or wrong actions. You cannot break this very natural and very complete and irreversible. Actually, irreversible. I'll talk about that in a minute. The irreversibility is not completely irreversible. So that we'll discuss it. But for most purposes, what you deserve is what you get. There is no flaw in the natural law of doing this. Okay? So the only thing is that because of our ignorance, when somebody is dispensing a bad result to me, I think he or she is responsible for giving me this bad result. In fact, they are the messengers. This is what is called nimitta karanam. They are instrumental in giving it to you. They are messengers to you. How is Ishvara going to give you some problems? It all comes from Ishvara. Ishvara is not going to come to you by appearing as Vishnu. And as you're going in the car, it gives you a big dhakka and your car just smashes. It's not going to happen. So what will happen is that there is a person who is not looking. They are looking someplace else and they cross the yellow line and they hit you. But it was all occasioned by Vishnu. Instigated by Vishnu. It said, this person needs to have an accident for whatever reason. That's a different thing as to what reason. You can look into that later. But at that point, the expression of wrong actions is coming through some foolish person who was not looking. And, there's this very sad case I remember. This was several years back, I think at least 15 and perhaps 20, 25 years ago. There was a big fair in southern part of this county, I think somewhere in Gilroy. And this young woman who was driving a car, and she reached across, I remember this so well, she actually killed 4 people. She ran over a number of people on the roadside because it was very crowded, and she got off the road and plowed into a number of people. 4 of the people died. And when inquiry was done as to what happened, how did you do that? She said that I was reaching across on my glove compartment to take some of my favorite CDs out from there. And in the process of doing so, I lost control of my steering wheel and it went in a wrong direction. That's what happened. But those 4 people had to die. That was all ordained ahead of time. So the point is that one needs to understand that the karya karana bhava, the connection between cause and effect, is the foundation of the entire jagat. There's no ifs and buts about it. So the only thing is that the person who actually dispenses the bad action towards you is merely a messenger. He takes the burden off of you because some bad actions had to happen. And he is, or he or she, was the one who actually delivered that to you. That's all. So sometimes, you have, you even have, Swami Maheshanji says, there are so many examples of wrong medicines being given that have some very good effects on you. So they were the medicines who were not really intended, but you found out that some other disease that was not even part of the discovery process really helped you doing that. And so, really speaking, if anybody does something to you, consider them they are worthy of your thanks internally. You don't have to go outside and say, I'm very happy that you hurt me. You don't have to say that. But internally, the Gyanankusham, the Ankusham for the knowledge is that really they are actually your Hitaishi. So this is the meaning of the verse number 14. And I think we can do one more. I'm going somewhat quickly, and then I think we can actually wrap up a little early. I think that's all I had prepared for. I might go to 16 and see what it says, but at least I have time to read number 12, 13, 14, and 15 in preparation for this class. So let's go now to verse number 15. This is a long sentence in Hindi, so let me just quickly read it and then I will translate that. जब दूसरों द्वारा बिना विचारे बेवहज अपमानित हो के तब समझे कि मेरे ही पुराने अशुभ कर्म का ये फल है। जब स्वयं ने ऐसा कुछ कहा किया होता कि जिससे छिड़कर दूसरा अपमान करे, तब विचार करे कि इस तरह का व्यवहार भी इच्छा से मैंने ही इसका मौका दिया था, अतः मेरी ही इच्छा पूरी हो रही है। अथवा जिसने दुर्व्यवहार संभावित है, उससे जब व्यवहार करते हैं और आशा अनुरूप अपमान आदि करता है, तब याद रखना चाहिए कि क्योंकि मैंने दुर्व्यवहार की आशा कर ही रहा था, इसलिए मेरी इच्छा पूरी हो गई है। It's rather convoluted and long one, and so I'll try to translate that as best as I can. So if one is the recipient of wrong behavior without any cause, you cannot really pinpoint why somebody has done this to you when you didn't even deserve it. So, a good example of that is someone who unknowingly runs into you. You are all going in the right direction. My oldest granddaughter just got a driver's license, and so we were just discussing it with my son, and so we were all saying, I hope that she's well trained and she's a safe driver and so on. So he was saying the right thing, that she may be a safe driver, but sometimes you come across people who are unsafe drivers, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like this woman who ran into these four people and killed them. They were just standing there, minding their own business, and there's no fault of theirs. This school shooting that happened in Texas today, like it happens so often. So sad. no fault of theirs. Then one has to conclude, based exactly on the laws that we went through in the previous verse, that karya karana is not to be, cannot be violated. That is the law. Then you can say that because something bad was done for me without any cause on my part, then it must be due to something that happened before. It's like a vasana or a samskaras. Okay. Then another type is where I may have instigated and someone reacted back to me. There is relatively simple that, there's no reason to go into the past and look at, unseen reasons. There is a seen reason. That's what's there. Then another one is in this long sentence is that sometimes by your mere actions, you also don't intend to hurt anyone, but you end up doing so anyway. And that provokes the person who really does something bad to you. And here Swamiji says that, in fact, there is a saying here. Let me see if I can read it. Yeah, there is a Hindi saying. Well, anyway, before the Hindi saying, let me just tell you that sometimes by making fun of things, you hurt people's feelings. You're just hurting someone's emotions who can react just by making what you consider to be a joke. So he says, in Hindi it says, Rog ka ghar khansi, jhagde ka ghar hansi. Rog ka ghar khansi, jhagde ka ghar hansi. Means that the home of a disease is a coughing spell. Khansi means coughing. And the home of conflict is hasi, means it is a joke. I remember this something is very personal to me because I have some close friends that I've grown up with. I'm not grown up, but we've had for like 50 years in our family, about 4 or 5 people. And one of them, somehow I got in, this has been going on for so long, I got into the habit of making fun of him. And he would also respond and, and I would be okay with it, so we would joke around and so on. Then my wife sometimes told me, she said, I think you overdo this joking around with your friend. I used to say, no, it's okay, it's all right. I don't really mean anything. It's just, he's such a good friend. And he also jokes back to me and so on. Then his older daughter, once she became an adult, talked to my son, who was about the same age, and actually said, your dad really hurts my dad by making jokes about him. So this became an issue. And my son came to me and he says, Dad, I think you should lay off of this because, this woman, this daughter of your friend, she made it a point to tell me And your friend has probably never told you this, but this hurts him. I decided absolutely. I didn't realize that. So I never really did that. And this happened, I stopped like what, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And I am very careful to not just be flighty with this person. But I was lucky that there was nothing bad that happened. We were always dissipated, and that was the end of it. But Swamiji says that can actually create, if you're not that good a friend, and you are just making fun of someone, the other person will say, what do you mean by that? No, what do you mean by that? You should not be saying things like that. And it can really go into problems and so on. So anyway, the behavior of the person can either be causeless, with cause, or through carelessness. All of that should be kept in mind in maintaining your equilibrium and not letting it go out of hand. So this is number 15. What time is it? It's 9 o'clock. Let me look at what 16 says, whether I can, without reading it. Interesting. I think we can just basically just read it, a little bit of it. I'll leave the explanation for next time. He says, संसरणशील व अनेक दुखों का पात्र ये शरीर है जिससे मैं छूटना चाहता हूँ. ये मेरा शत्रु है. जो इस शरीर से द्वेष करता है वही मेरा मित्र है. शरीर को अपना रूप समझूं तो मैं अपना शत्रु होऊंगा. Interesting. He says, again, this is meant for a higher level of seeking for Vedantins, but we should see the truth contained in this. He says that your body is the source of problems for you. That's pretty obvious. That the body means the body-mind complex, the entire expression of who I am, is the one who really gives me dukkha. I don't give myself dukkha, but my taking my body-mind, as we know, I'm not teaching here, gives me the problem. So in that sense, it is my enemy. Because anything that gives me problems is my enemy. Enemy in the sense one who is not, who's hurting me. So I should see that. So instead of befriending it, I should treat it as a source of problems. Now, if someone targets your body-mind complex and treats it as inimical to him, should you not consider that person to be your best friend also? Because sometimes what happens is, you don't really have a friendly approach to anyone except both you and him, let's say it's a he, both you and he dislike the same person. And when that happens, then you become friends with each other. This is exactly what is happening in this Quad, where India is having a lot of problems with China. China is really threatening India, and encroaching on its rightful property. It's already taken a lot of property away from us in the 1962 war and Aksai Chin, and claims, all of that. Same thing is happening with the Americans. We Americans also are really getting hurt by the Chinese not following the rules, stealing things from us, and not playing by the proper rules. So the enmity between US and China is growing. The enmity between India and China is growing. So therefore, it is very natural that India and the US are getting friendlier and friendlier. They may not have become so, but they've got a target common enemy. This is exactly what is said here. Your body-mind complex is giving you a lot of problems. And someone else also hates your body-mind complex, because no one can even see the Atma. So they don't hate the Atma, but they can only see what is visible, which is your body-mind complex. So they intensely dislike it. Therefore, doesn't it mean that you should shake hands with someone and say, we have the same enemy? Isn't it wonderful? Let's be friends. This is the essence of the number 16. Or numbers, which one did I say? I think I did number 17. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did number 17. I'll have to go back and read. Sorry about that. I'll do that 16 next time. But at least I think we covered the essence of 17. If there are some, it's a very long one, so it's very possible that some more things may come up that I will cover. But I'm also anxious to finish this before I go to the ashram, and so I'm somewhat speeding up. I think we'll do it. But you get the essence of it anyway. All right, with that, we'll close the class today. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So Amit asks, how should we treat the shooting of innocent little children at school and or the grandmothers shopping for food at grocery store? Well, I think, this is clearly a problem of the society. We have no choice. I mean, there's no way of treating it other than just making our minds, and hopefully that the corruption at the high level can be corrected. if you saw the statement of the coach of the Warriors today, Steve Kerr, I highly recommend it. He also laid it out so clearly, and he's very angry, and he says, I cannot believe how the politicians are allowing this to happen despite some clear indications that this is bringing the society down. And it is really just the Senate, mostly controlled by Republicans, who are not going along with it. And he laid the example, the blame squarely on them, and saying they are clinging to the power, in the sense that they know that if they do not support the NRA, and if they have they give more control over arms to people, they will not be elected, because the people don't want them to be elected. And so they are just scared of not being elected, and they are sacrificing the lives of all these poor children because they themselves are afraid of losing their jobs. That's all it is. It's the corruption at the very high level. And this will take a long time to correct. And this is how the country was founded. And it has really gone in the wrong direction of everybody owning a gun. So hopefully this will wash out in the next couple of 100 years. Until then, there will be a lot of suffering. There's nothing else you can do about it. So I guess the only thing one can do is to join the active efforts to defeat such voices, and bring sanity to the government, to the politicians. And until then, there's a lot of suffering. I don't know what else that can be done. All right. If there's no other comments or questions, then we will disband for tonight, and hopefully we'll see you next week.